In 1788, the area that would soon become Tennessee was in a strange legal limbo. It had belonged to North Carolina, which ceded it to the federal government, which hadn't yet gotten around to incorporating it as the Southwest Territory. Residents of part of the area had declared it the state of Franklin, complete with a governor and Indian treaties, and there were some conspiratorial types seeking to add it to Spain's North American holdings, all of which prompted North Carolina to reclaim the territory. Into this Wild West arrived a 21-year-old lawyer and son of Scotch-Irish immigrants named Andrew Jackson. He fit right in. Jackson had already had a wild life by the time he arrived in Nashville, a new town on the Cumberland River. He had been born either in backcountry South or North Carolina and served as a scout and courier at age 13 in the Revolutionary War, before being captured and slashed with a sword by a British officer for refusing to polish his boots. In the prison camp, he contracted smallpox. He and his brother were released to his mother in a prisoner exchange, only to lose her to cholera, which he contracted after volunteering to nurse American prisoners kept in British ships in the Charleston harbor. Jackson, whose father had died before he was born, was an orphan at 14. Soon afterward, he learned that his paternal grandfather had died in Scotland and left him several £100 sterling, perhaps as much as $85,000 in today's money. But to claim the inheritance, he had to travel to Charleston, where he was overwhelmed by the temptations of city life and soon partied and gambled away the money. He also inherited 200 acres of land his father had worked himself to death clearing. But farming didn't appeal to Jackson, and after a brief stint as a school teacher, he decided to become a lawyer at a time when the legal landscape in the United States resembled the wild frontier, even more so in the backcountry. Jackson completed his studies in Salisbury, North Carolina, and was admitted to the bar at age 20. His roommate, John McNary, was named judge of the Western District of North Carolina, which by 1796 would become the state of Tennessee. McNary, in turn, appointed Jackson as the court solicitor or prosecutor. According to Jackson biographer H.W. Brands, neither post was a plum. Each appealed chiefly to lawyers lacking profitable practice in the East. Jackson and McNary made it to the town of Jonesboro safely, but had to wait for reinforcements before traveling the remaining 200 miles through the wilderness to Nashville. While in Jonesboro, the novice Jackson faced off against Waitstill Avery, one of North Carolina's most respected attorneys, in a civil case. Avery ridiculed some legal position taken by Jackson, who then challenged Avery to a duel. Luckily, cooler heads prevailed by the appointed hour, and both men deliberately missed their shots, shook hands, and were friendly ever after. That was Jackson's first duel, but it wouldn't be his last, and they wouldn't all end so amicably or bloodlessly. That was Jackson's life so far once he made it to Nashville, a town with only a few hundred inhabitants, a handful of stores and taverns, a distillery, and an assortment of log cabins, horse sheds, and chicken coops. Within 8 years, he was off to Philadelphia, then the nation's capital, to serve as Tennessee's first congressman. The following year, the legislature named him a U.S. senator. But he resigned after 6 months, having no patience for his colleagues bloviating about inconsequential matters. A few months after Jackson's return to Nashville, Governor John Sevier gave him an interim appointment as judge of the Superior Court of Law and Equity, the state Supreme Court, perhaps hoping to get a potential political rival out of the way. 3 months later, the legislature made the appointment permanent. Jackson biographer H.W. Brands writes that Jackson's temperament wasn't much better suited to interpreting laws than to making them. An impartial dispensing of justice would seem to require a dispassionate personality, but Jackson's was just the opposite. His sense of right and wrong anchored his whole outlook on life. If justice pointed one way and the law another, the law would surely lose. On the other hand, although Jackson's personality didn't fit the judge's traditional mold, it suited his time and place. Most Westerners had little patience for law per se, which often struck them as pettifoggery. Like Jackson, they believed justice was something any honest man could discern, and they appreciated Jackson's decisiveness. Jackson's duties included riding a circuit of several towns and villages. One day, while dispensing justice at a crossroads, he was interrupted by an armed, belligerent local who threatened violence against everyone involved in the legal proceedings. When the sheriff and his posse proved unable to arrest the rowdy for contempt of court, Jackson declared a 10-minute recess, removed his robe, and strode out the door, pistol in hand. Confronting the ruffian, Jackson said, "Surrender, you infernal villain, this very instant, or I'll blow you through." After holding an entire posse at bay, the bully meekly surrendered, explaining, "Why, when he came up, I looked him in the eye, and I saw shoot. There wasn't shooting nary other eye in the crowd. So I says to myself, says I, Hoss, it's about time to sing small, and so I did." This was the kind of judge people in the backcountry respected. So much so that Jackson was soon elected Major General of the state militia. The Tennessee Constitution, which he had helped write, allowed him to keep his job at the state superior court, and his court work regularly took him to Knoxville, which was then the capital. There he ran into Sevier, who was now out of office and had also run for the Major General position, only to have a successor, a good friend of Jackson's named Archibald Roane, cast the tie-breaking vote in Jackson's favor. That had infuriated Sevier enough, but then Jackson presented Roane with evidence implicating Sevier in a fraudulent land speculation scheme. Jackson biographer Robert V. Ramini writes of their encounter in Knoxville. Seeing the cause of his present embarrassment, Sevier lashed Jackson with stinging words about daring to challenge and humiliate a great man. Who did Jackson, a pitiful nothing of a lawyer, think he was? Sevier sneered at him and his pretensions. Poor Jackson could hardly answer, so shocked was he by the suddenness and intensity of this abuse. He stammered a defense by citing his many services to the state. "Services?" Sevier laughed. "I know of no great service you have rendered the country, except taking a trip to Natchez with another man's wife." If you're thinking a duel challenge ensued, you're right, though the actual rendezvous turned out to be more of a comedy of errors than a proper duel. But Sevier's low blow hit home because it was true. Not long after arriving in Nashville, Jackson had taken his wife by what historian David Hackett Fisher calls an act of voluntary abduction, while she was still unhappily married to another man. In this, as in so much of Jackson's behavior, he was acting out old folkways from his Scotch-Irish ancestry that were also part of backcountry culture. Bride abduction, sometimes voluntary, sometimes involuntary, was an old custom in Scotland, Ireland, and the English border counties. Both types of abduction were practiced as late as the 18th century. It was observed of the borderlands and Ulster during this period that abductions, both under the impulse of passion and from motives of cupidity, were frequent. The border custom of bridal abduction was introduced to the American backcountry. In North and South Carolina during the 18th century, petitioners complained to authorities that their wives and daughters were carried captives by rival clans. In addition to illuminating the culture that produced him, these early chapters from Jackson's life forecast his future exploits as a military chieftain and as the first president from a frontier state. He would never be one to let legal niceties stand in his way. He would buck authority, but never let his own be challenged. I've got more about Jackson and the folkways that shaped him at my website, where you can also sign up to get the post delivered for free to your inbox. If you like these videos enough to want to help me make more of them, I'd be super thankful if you click the super thanks button below. And help this little channel keep growing by hitting that like button, commenting with your thoughts on Jackson's Wild Wild West, and sharing the video with anyone you think might be interested. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.